Hej, jag heter Daniel Sandström och är förläggare på Albert Bonniers förlag. Välkomna till Judisk kultur i Sverige online. Idag ska vi prata med den israeliska författaren David Grossman. David Grossman är känd för en stor läsekrets med romaner som Fallen ur tiden och En häst går in på en bar, för vilken han också fick Bookerpriset. Han är aktuell med en ny roman som heter Med mig leker livet som kommer ut i höst, och vi ska prata med honom om den men också om livet i Israel under coronan. Välkomna. So David, how are you basically at this point in this strange time of ours?
I'm quite fine. I mean, around me are the harsh news and numbers and people who are really suffering, but somehow my life became so slow, so much slower than usual. Usually I'm a very active person and very fast person, and suddenly as if there's a kind of slow motion in everything, which is not such a bad thing, I must tell you. And I was about to start a new novel when the corona broke out, and I decided to postpone it, not to write right now, because I know myself when I'm writing, I'm totally enveloped by the book I'm writing, and in a way, I'm too much even protected from life or from reality, and I don't want to be protected now because it's, you know, I mean, it's a horrible thing, the plague, but it's once in a generation or two, and I don't want to miss what is going on and how it affects everything, the relationship within the family, with friends, really with everything, all the layers of life and of reality. So I'm not writing now. I wrote a little book for children, which I read on the net, to be read to children, of course. But besides that, I even force myself, just to be, okay?
Yeah.
It cannot be, no more than that.
So, but it's almost as if that we who are not writing novels on an everyday basis can identify with it, with how it is to be a writer, because we are all now secluded in our homes and are without any social life, which is, I guess, sometimes a situation where you as an author has to be kind of used to. I mean, isolation and seclusion is necessary for your work, basically.
Exactly, Daniel. For me, there is not a great change because most of my life I spend alone in a room. And like in every time, I find myself walking back and forth as I do when I'm writing, because when I'm writing, I have this strange, really bizarre mechanism that I must walk while writing. I cannot sit for a long time. I can sit when I have to write an idea. But there are months in the process of writing that I have to walk as if to ventilize my mind. Oh, I don't know what. Once a doctor explained me why I have to walk. And here again, I'm walking. I don't have a story. I forbid myself to have a story, but the machinery of the creativity still goes on. It looks quite strange from the side.
Yeah. So you mentioned the plague, and also a couple of days ago you had a very interesting piece of article that was published in Haaretz and also later in Expressen in Sweden, where you spoke about the way of this virus, how it will change us, or at least it will give us an opportunity to change. Can you expand on that a little bit?
Yes, I thought when I thought of the possible implications of this pandemic, and of course it's a terrible thing. People are going to lose so much of their life and their relatives and their work, and sometimes even their dignity, and they are going to find themselves in totally new places. And yet, you know, I guess that there will be people who, for them, it will shake them in a way that they will start to ask questions. You know, even I thought of people who considered having another child. Maybe they will decide not to bring a child to such a world. Or maybe on the contrary, people who did not want to have children will have children, or religious people will start to doubt the existence of God that allows such atrocity. Maybe people will start to ask, is there really any meaning to our life, or it's just this unpredictable nothingness, arbitrariness that throw us here and there, and it doesn't really matter what we do or do not do, what are our values, and if we do or not have values at all. Really deep questions that after a while you start to ask yourself, and maybe there will be changes in our attitude. Even, you know, I'm an Israeli, so of course one of the first questions is, what will be the face of the conflict between us and the Palestinians now? After we all felt how fragile, frail we all are. Is it really a divine decree that we fight and kill ourselves? Why not to try? Because now we understand what life is made of. Why not to try to achieve a compromise as soon as possible? Many questions like that. To tell you the truth, I think that maybe very few people will dive into these questions, and fewer even will remain with these questions once the crisis is over, because probably happily people would love to jump back to their previous life. But maybe it's good to ask these questions, just, you know, as a kind of an immunization against the disease, to be active all the time.
It is almost as if we were living inside an existential novel by a great modernist author at this point. Our lives are suspended, and we have to face, as you say, all these questions that we normally brush off or just don't dare to look at. So, but do you think also that this is a moment where we, due to the very special circumstances that we live in, that we also turn to literature in a way that we haven't done for quite some time?
From my experience, I find myself, for example, right now reading simultaneously 5 books, which means that I don't read any book, actually, that I'm zapping between books. And this is, I asked friends and they reported of the same feeling.
I do the same thing, basically.
Yeah, it's really hard to concentrate, and especially when you read a literature that is demanding. And good literature almost always is demanding. And I think people consume much more Netflix than Dostoevsky.
Yeah.
Well, it is. I mean, I understand it. It's hard to concentrate. It's hard to demand from yourself to ask these heavy questions. Mainly, you want to survive this period.
Yeah. Also, I think that the reading is something that you long to do, but at the same time, you maybe you say you're too restless because you're so not used to this situation. So reading being kind of a relaxation is not relaxing while you're so much in distress. But as you say, people rather look at Netflix than Dostoevsky. But you, I mean, we have a book coming out that you've written. That's, I mean, it's due in August in Sweden, and the Swedish title is Med mig leker livet. What could you say about this book that is, as we speak, being brought into the Swedish language?
It's a book that is based on a real story that was given to me by a lady some 25 years ago, I think. One day she called me and she had a criticism on something that I wrote, something political that I wrote, and she didn't agree with it. And we started to talk, and immediately I felt that she is a very unique human being. Now, every human being is unique, of course, but she was unique in a unique way. I never met a person like her with such combinations of toughness and softness, a very principled lady with a lot of values and very tough and crystallized values, and at the same time so humane and warm and full of love and empathy. And we started to talk. We talked, I think the first time it was something like an hour. And then she asked if she may call me again. And I said, of course. And next week she called again and we started to talk. And it evolved into a friendship of 20 years until the day she died. She died when she was 97. Her name was Eva Panic Nahir. She was born to a Jewish bourgeois family in Croatia. And the heart of the story, of her life story, was a love story of her to a Serbian non-Jewish officer, Rade Panic. They fell in love when she was 18 and he was 24. And it was a total love, a hermetic love. I never met such a love story in my life. And believe me, Daniel, being a writer, I meet a lot of love stories and people come and deposit at me their life stories and love stories, and I bless it. I love stories. And very quickly I understood that there was a tragedy, a secret and a wound and a tragedy behind this story. Because this woman, when she was imprisoned by the Secret Service of Tito in the beginning of the 50s of the last century, she was urged and even forced to declare that her late husband, her great lover, rather, that he was the enemy of the people. Mm-hmm. And she refused to do it. And they tormented her and they told her, listen, you have two choices. Either you declare he was the enemy of the people and then you will get free, nobody tell you anything, you will get a little pension from the government, and most important, you will take your little daughter, Tiana, who is now 6.5 years, and you go to your home and you shall live peacefully all your life. Only tomorrow in one of the papers, or 2 or 3, it will be written, Eva Panic denounced the traitor, the enemy of the people, Rade Panic. If you do not agree, then you will be sent immediately to Goli Otok, which is an island of re-education, a terrible place, by the way, maybe we'll speak about it. And your daughter, Tiana, will be thrown into the street. And they say street, and they gave a very specific look, and everybody knew what it means. And she had this dilemma. They gave her 3 minutes to decide, and she has decided. And her decision haunted her all her life, and haunted the people who were near to her, and haunted her daughter. And I tried to write this story. By the way, from the very beginning, she wanted me to write this story, and every time she checked if I've already started writing the story. And I told her, dear Eva, I'm not a documentarist. I'm a fiction writer. I cannot just write your story one-to-one. It's an amazing story, but I need the story to go through my DNA. Okay, I need to invent it, to imagine it. If you allow me to invent and to imagine your real story, then I'll be able to write it. And she accepted it, and she understood how a writer is working. And the story is about what happened to her, about this love of life, and about her and her daughter and the trip they all made to the island, Goli Otok, the island of the re-education, where she spent horrible 3 years.
So how does this relate to the previous books that you've been writing or written? It seems to me that there's always certain strands that there are recurring themes in your books. At the same time, you have such a diverse output that they always seem to come in to you from an unexpected territory, like this one. How does this relate to your previous book, the Booker Prize winner, for instance?
Yeah, I like it that you said that the books are unpredictable and unexpected. It's exactly what happens to me. I'm always taken by surprise, and sometimes it takes me a year to wait for this surprise. But when it comes, it comes.
Yeah.
And it's surprising and unexpected to me. And sometimes I feel that my books are meant just to betray me, to betray all my defense mechanism, all my very bourgeois protected life, and they take me, like an eagle taking a little lamb beyond the horizon, you know. And then when I say it, I think that maybe they do not betray me, my books, but they are loyal to me more than I dare to be loyal to myself.
Yeah.
How is it connected, this book? I think that almost in all my books, I deal a lot with individual who is facing an outer arbitrariness.
Yeah.
It can be the arbitrariness of the Nazi way of thinking and acting, like in See Under Love. It can be the arbitrariness of the body, the way the body is dominant over our soul. The body is the mechanical machinery, and the soul is, you know, this free sparkle, and yet it's subjugated to the madness and the capriciousness of the body. And I wrote about the occupation arbitrariness, and I wrote about the ultimate arbitrariness, which is death, and how do we deal with the fact that someone whom we loved is no more with us? What can we do in order to stay in contact with him, to feel his warmth as much as it can, and how we can go back to our life from being with him? One thing I learned, that whenever I write about arbitrariness, one of the arbitrariness that torment me and affects my life, the moment I started writing about arbitrariness, I'm no more helpless in front of it. I am no more totally passive and apathetic in front of it, but I got some room to maneuver, some freedom. I will not change the world. Death will continue to rule. Occupation goes on for almost 55 years, the occupation we occupy the Palestinians. The body and the soul will remain in the same terrible relationship. And yet the fact that I gave my private names to these phenomena, that makes me, for the first time in my life, not a victim, not a totally passive victim. And there is a lot of, I can say, a lot of sweetness in this feeling that I'm released from the despotic regime of arbitrariness. And also here, of course, in Life Plays With Me, there are some manifestations of arbitrariness. And it's interesting to see how everyone is facing this arbitrariness in another way. And I tried to show how, you know, in spite of the enormous pain and feeling of betrayal that prevailed between the two women, after all, they were able to restore their relationship with such greatness and generosity that I rarely see. And there was such love between Eva Panic-Nahir and her daughter, Tiana Wages, whom I had the privilege to meet and to talk to for many long hours. And because of the wound that was still open between them, it allowed me and allowed them, I guess, to touch such deep and primal feelings and to be part of a family. And I regard family as the greatest drama of mankind. I think that the greatest things of mankind, the most important things, they did not happen in corridors of parliaments or in battlefields or in palaces. They rather happened in kitchens, in children's rooms and in bedrooms. And I'm fascinated by families. And this book, because it tells about the most extreme situation of one family, it allows me to touch so many layers of this huge creation of the family.
So now, when you describe the creative process, you spoke about walking around while gathering the energy. I would guess it is to set yourself down and then write the story. Has this process over the years changed a lot for you, or is it still the same, or is it increasingly more difficult for you, or increasingly more easier to access this energy that you need to write the book?
I think it's more difficult because I am more aware of how many layers there are for everything.
Yeah.
And I think, you know, I spoke once with my late dear friend Amos Oz, very near before he died. And he said that right now, or no, he said that when I started to write, said Amos, the foot on the gasoline was much stronger than the foot on the brakes. And now it's the other way around. And I think I can identify with that. I just quote him and I feel how I miss him, how I long for him, how I would have benefited from talking to him now about the corona.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's still, if I may divert, it's still a major loss, and it's very, very painful because we were close, and I learned a lot from Amos. Yeah.
Yeah, and this is the first novel you've written since he passed away, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So
I was writing it while he was still alive, and he knew parts of it. We used to talk, to exchange ideas, and to exchange stories. Yeah.
Can you still access some of his reasoning or voice while you write, even if it's not present physically anymore?
I can guess what he would have said about this paragraph or the other paragraph. Yes.
So yes, but also I think that it means also that you as a writer now are you're even more mature in a way, and you're entering a later phase in your own life as a writer as well. Do you think there is such a thing as a late style for a writer?
A late style?
Yeah, when you are beyond beyond your middle-aged years, you're now so experienced and so used to writing books that your voice is changing because of all the things you know, basically the skills and also the years that you have put behind you.
Well, life changes us, and we pay with our life for our life experience.
Yeah.
And it changes everything, of course. If you are not changed by life, what are you? You are just passing through them without being touched.
Yeah.
Everything in me is being changed by things that happened to me in my family in the last years, and in the things that I saw, and in the people I met, and the people who made me grow up, and the people who formulated options for me. And it all accumulates. And in my writing, I think, you know, I think I ask more from my writing now than before. I know what it can give me, and I'm not talking about the literary quality. This is for others to judge. I know that writing for me, for example, after I lost my son Uri, the fact that I was writing a story when it happened, I wrote a woman who is escaping the news. And the fact that I had a place to go back to when all my world fell apart, that's what I felt. And nothing was taken for granted, nothing was taken for granted. But there was only one solid thing, and this is the book I was writing, and the characters who totally depended on me to fuel them, to feed them with life and warmth and sense of humor and sensuality and sexuality and anecdotes. And I was unable to abandon them. And every time after we lost Uri, every day I went back to the room I'm writing at, and I was feeding them, and felt that by feeding them, I pull myself back to life. And I know, you know, I'm not a religious person. I'm a non-believer. I mean, it's even important for me to be a non-believer, to feel that we are standing totally naked in front of this arbitrariness and nothingness of life, and it's on us to feed it with values and with meaning. But in the last years, I know, we cannot know anything about what happens after life. We don't know what happens when somebody dies. Nobody really crossed this line, this wall, this obtuse monolithic wall. But for a non-believer person like myself, there is now one thing that I can feel that he gives me together at the same time, the nothingness of death and the wholeness of life in a very strong way, both of them. And this is through art. It is through music and literature, poetry, cinema very much, and all the other arts that I consume as a reader or a listener or a spectator, or I create myself in my writing. And once you touched this place and you have been there and you really felt it, you will not satisfy for less than that. And I hope it will continue.
I surely hope so too. We're going to end our conversation very soon, but I want to ask you, is there anything, because I gather that a lot of people who are listening to this conversation are sitting isolated themselves and thinking about how to educate themselves or to entertain themselves during this strange period that we're in. So what kind of recommendation would you give them? What kind of work of art or movie or music would you say would be the best, the sweetest pill to take at this point for our situation?
Art in every form. I guess it's also in Sweden. I wish it will be also for you in Sweden, but all our theaters and museums and arts institutes opened their rooms and their doors to everyone who wants. We sit every evening, my wife and I, and we watch a wonderful play online or a wonderful movie. And if it's not so wonderful, we can change it. We choose another one, and you don't have to travel to the cinema. You don't have to look for a parking place. You are just there with your coffee, and it's a wonderful thing. If I may give a small advice, if some of our spectators now, if they have grandchildren, a wonderful thing is to read them stories through the Skype or the Zoom or whatever you want, even the WhatsApp. Just, for half an hour a day, first of all, to let their parents, the exhausted parents, relax and do other things more useful. And for us, the grandparents and the grandchildren, to have the bond of the story. And sometimes we prepare also little dolls to play with, and we make like radio plays. It's really very sweet half hour, and it's highly, highly recommended. On top of that, it is so important that children will get this chance for a good night's story, which is a wonderful thing, not only in days of the corona, because it allows a kind of intimacy that you cannot get otherwise between parents and their children. And I heard from a librarian who called me, and she said that one of the phenomena of this curfew at home is this child that she told me about, who got to the third grade and still was unable to read. And now when his mother read him stories, he started to read, because he was not one of 35 or 40 pupils in a class and a teacher who does not pay attention to him and not sensitive enough for him. He was with his mother, and immediately he caught the conversation.
No.
And if I may, in the end of our conversation, just mention another incident that I saw on the net. It was taken in Tel Aviv, a little video of a young woman who entered a bookstore. I wonder, because they should be closed according to the law, but she went there and she bought some books, and two policemen were chasing her because she violated the law, and she ignored them, and she walked in the street and they were chasing her hopelessly. And it was very, very clear. I don't know what her motivations were. I don't know anything, but it was very clear that for her, a book is as essential as medication or food. And she was fanatic about it, and nothing could have stopped her.
I couldn't agree with her more. It's essential as medication and food. Thank you so much, David. It was great talking to you. I hope you will practice all the distancing that you need and still be able to communicate through Skype and WhatsApp and everything. And so take care, and I hope I'll see you in Sweden soon.
I also hope it will be wonderful.
Yes. Bye bye. Tack så mycket för att ni har lyssnat på den här intervjun med David Grossman och för att ni har lyssnat på Judisk kultur i Sverige online. Håll utkik för en kommande intervju som vi också ska göra med Philip Sands. All information hittar ni på judiskultur.se. Tack så mycket, ta hand om er och sköt om er. Hej!